My name's Tim Adnitt, and I'm the product owner for Complete Control Software and also for the Native Kontrol Standard SDK, which we're here to talk about. I'm joined by Tobias, who's the head of application development at Native Instruments. And thank you to Rolly for inviting us to speak. It's a pleasure to be here. So what I'm really going to run through is quite high level. I'm going to give you an overview of exactly what Native Kontrol Standard, or NKS, is. Then I'll give you a short demo, because of course the best way to understand what it is actually just to see it actually working. And then I'm going to hand over to Tobias, who's going to just give you a little bit more detail about how this is implemented and the kind of technical process you go through in order to make this happen for your own plugins. So the first thing to say about NKS is that it actually sits across two of our brands, so the Komplete brand and the Maschine brand. So on the producer products, if you like. So on the left-hand side, you've got Complete Control. That's the S88 keyboard that was introduced very recently, just a few weeks ago. We also have the 254961. They all work with Complete Control software, which is designed to be a very lightweight plugin that is intended to be used with many, many instances inside a host, such as Logic or Cubase or Pro Tools or whatever you want to use. So lots of instances, very, very light, not a lot to it, deliberately. And then on the right, a groove-based production system, Maschine. So 3 controllers there. You can use any of these 3 with NKS. Plus, of course, you can connect Complete Control hardware to Maschine and have exactly the same experience as you would with the plugin. But this is much more a full groove production environment. It can be used as in-host still, or can be used standalone. So either of those works. So what exactly is NKS? Well, the first thing to say is it really is just an extension to the VST plugin format. There's no point in reinventing a wheel that works very well. So it's an extension to that format. And essentially, it's a layer on top of the plugins and various things that we've been talking about, various presenters yesterday and also today. What does it do? It opens the NI ecosystem to provide a standard for hardware integration. So what does this exactly mean? Well, in order to explain what this means, I'll just talk a little bit about the history of why we did this and how we ended up there. So looking back 2 years, a year, 2 years, we had already a very large portfolio of Complete instruments that has got bigger and bigger and bigger over the years, of course. We're on Complete 10 right now, you can imagine. So what we wanted to do was pull all of this together into what we call the native browser, so that you could go through multiple engines. It didn't matter if this was a contact-based instrument, a reactor-based instrument, or FM8, or massive, or any of those things. Any one of those you could just load under a single host without having to worry about which engine you needed first. That was an important part of it, giving artwork, tagging, presets, easy ways in to your pool of instruments. We also added native map. What is native map? Essentially, it's the parameter mapping. So it allows you to say, I want these controls mapped to this page or the next page in groups of 8. So that's native map. Again, all for our own instruments initially. Embedding the GUI, that was really important because actually, as I mentioned before, Complete Control, it's a lightweight wrapper in a sense, or host itself. We wanted to make sure that you could still access the GUI very easily. We put a lot of love, all of us, into our GUIs for good reason, to make them very usable with a mouse. That workflow is still important. Hardware is important, but software is important too. So we wanted to make sure we maintain that without using up loads of screen real estate or any of these things. And of course, finally, some of the cool hardware features. So for example, the light guide, which you may be familiar with on Complete Control, which helps in all sorts of ways. But for example, it can show you where your key switches are to change between different types of articulation with a string patch or any of these kinds of things. So we did all of this for Complete Control 1.0, which was released just over a year ago, and also for Maschine 2, which was released a year before that. So what's the obvious next step? The obvious next step is to offer this same integration opportunity to every person, every developer who makes VIs, who makes plugins. So that's what we did, and that's what Native Kontrol Standard is, or NKS is. It's the exact same integration that we created for ourselves, for our own plugins, for any third party, any developer who makes VST instruments. It's that simple. The native browser, native map, the various view modes, the embedded GUI, and the access to all the hardware features that we have on our 2 hardware brands. The other thing about NKS, we wanted to make sure it was created, that the plugins themselves were created by the people who know them best. Who knows them best? The people who make them, of course. So we believe that premium integration of a plugin with hardware really requires a deep conceptual and technical understanding of an instrument. And so what we do with NKS is we provide the tools for that so that you can have this premium integration, but the integration experience itself is controlled by the person who makes the plugin. So they choose what goes on page 1, what goes on page 2, what the preset names are, how they use the light guide, all of these things. So it's good for developers, they have that control over the experience, and of course it's good for end users because you end up with premium integration that just feels really, really good. The other thing, of course, is it's deployed with the plugin itself. So it's always up to date. When you release an update to your plugin, the user installs that update. Alongside that, inside your installer, you have everything necessary to support this system. So as I said, best thing to do to really show this is to actually show this running. So I'm going to show this with some plugins from our friends at Arturia. In fact, Kevin had a lot to do with the development of the SDK. So we worked very closely with Kevin from Arturia. Actually, while we were developing it, we were kind of working in parallel. So just to make sure that we got constant feedback, really found out how, where the pitfalls were and so on and so forth. So thank you, Kevin, for all your help with that. And I'm just going to show in here the native browser, first of all. We're working with a lot of other partners too, of course, but you can see some of their stuff in here. First thing I'm going to show you is a very simple product search, a very obvious way in to the ecosystem. I'm doing this in the software. I could just as easily do it from the hardware. We have this on-screen overlay that's on the other screen, but it's easier in this setup with these two screens just to use the software, but it's possible from the hardware. Also worth saying, I'm using Komplete Kontrol software. Exactly the same thing applies to Maschine. I could have a Maschine controller up here. I could have Maschine running. It really makes no difference. So it's a common experience across both products. So I'm going to go in here and do the obvious thing of knowing that I want a synthesizer. And you can see in here amongst all of the artwork, anyone who's familiar with Native Browser already know about our own artwork. And in amongst it all, there's obviously a lot of products, a whole of V collection, in fact, from Arturia as well. So what I can do is just pick any one of these. I'm going to go for Jupiter, load it up. Screen resolution's a little low, unfortunately, but you get the idea. The plugin is embedded. I can play it immediately. That's the first patch. It's nice. So that's like an artwork selection. I can dig deeper. I've loaded Jupiter, so I've now narrowed down my search to Jupiter. What if I just want basses? I just hit bass. What if I want, let's say, just digital bass, and so on and so forth. And I can basically reduce my results list down here, write down, and load things that only really fit that. So that's how I'm looking inside a product. And of course, if I open up this area, this is, of course, all on the hardware as well. So I can control the pages, skip through, grab one of these knobs and turn it. This is native map. So you're really seeing a representation of what I see on the display here, or what I would see along the bottom just by the knobs on a Maschine controller, any of the Maschine controllers as well. So it's really, really fast. I can go straight in, adjust the cutoff, play with my sound, a bit more resonance. So I can really, really quickly dial in with native map exactly what I'm looking for. And one of the key things about native map is all the important controls are right at the start. So, filters, the things that really impact the sound the most. And then in this case, there's 9 pages. You can go deeper and deeper. They're all organized into sections. And as I say, this is all implemented, in this case, by Kevin from Arturia, by the person who develops the plugin. The other way to work, if I find my mouse cursor, the other way I can do this, I was talking about it being kind of engine agnostic, so to speak. So instead of searching by a product, I can actually just say, what kind of sound do I want? And this is important because for a lot of us, we don't necessarily know that we want this particular synth. We just want to try out a bunch of basses that fit a certain category. And this is another important way in. So I can jump into bass. I can go for analog, and I'm going to go for monophonic in this case. What I've got now is every single instrument, every single preset that fits into that selection. So why is this important for NKS? Well, the main reason is this. If I now load the first preset, happens to be Monarch. I didn't know that, happens to be Monarch. If I go to my next preset, I want to try that one out, it's Prophet 5, it's Arturia. If I go to the next one, CS80. So you'll see how it moves in between all of the different plugins that you've got inside that system. So it's a great way for users. Right. It's not me. It's a really, that's very confusing. It's a really, really good way for users to actually just really uncover those gems. We all have go-to plugins. I mean, I'm a musician myself. We all have our go-to plugins. We can fall into the same old traps. It's, of course, really good to just skip through because you're looking at bases and find some gems in there. That was great for Komplete, but of course, when you add all these additional plugins, the whole world of VIs to it, it becomes even more interesting. So that's really a general overview of Komplete Kontrol itself. I could obviously go into a lot more detail, but you can always follow up with me or ask any questions. So just going back to our slides, why does this make sense for VST developers? That's, of course, a really important question. I mean, in this room, there's several people who we've spoken to already about NKS. Why do it? It has to make sense for you guys to put in this effort as well, because, of course, it is some effort. Goes without saying, the first thing is it's a deeply integrated hardware-software solution. So a lot of developers, a lot of plugin developers, don't necessarily want to make hardware. They don't have an interest in making hardware. They don't have the capacity. It's not their forte. It's not what they want to do. So what we're trying to give people is essentially a hardware platform that they can have this great integrated experience for without actually having to go and create yet another system themselves. That's very key. Those people who do make hardware, Arturia again is a good example of this, a great line of keyboards as well. It's good there as well because there's a wide customer base there. So when you do this, you're really speaking very directly to all Komplete Kontrol customers or Maschine customers, and actually all Komplete customers, because Komplete Kontrol software can also be used without the hardware, just as a universal browser and a way of controlling the sounds. As you saw there, you can see all the controller, the parameter mapping, native map, so on and so forth. So it just gives a really good experience on another piece of hardware because, let's be honest, most of us own one keyboard, not several keyboard controllers. They maybe own one Groove production system, and so on and so forth. So it's a really good way of just reaching more people. The other things are quite obvious things. Of course, we offer cross-promotion on all of our channels, so newsletters and social media and so on and so forth, various videos and what have you. And the final thing is the NKSF file format itself, which we created especially for NKS. That's something that is free to use for NKS partners, people who work on this. It's standards-based, it's RIF plus message pack, and it's pretty easy to adopt if you want to use it as your own format. It's totally optional that, but if you want to, you can use it as your own file format for the plugins. So that gives you a brief overview. I'm going to pass over to Tobias, and Tobias is just going to talk to you a little bit about the SDK itself, what's in there and how you implement this. So pass over to Tobias.
Yeah, thank you, Tim, for the nice overview about the NKS and the nice product introduction. I would like to talk a little bit more about the technical details about the NKS, about the SDK itself. I will briefly go through the documentation, and then I'm explaining a little bit the steps which is necessary actually for you developers to implement NKS into your products. Tim, maybe can you open the folder, the NKS folder?
So I'll just mirror this page. Now they're mirrored. So it's just on the desktop.
So on the desktop now we have here the folder of the current SDK, the 1.1 version. And what do we have here? We have first of all the main document with a set of guidelines. Bookmarks, table of contents. Okay. So this documentation explains the workflow, how you can integrate actually NKS into your products, how you can make use of the light guides, how you can actually map the parameters, how you can create the presets for your products, and how it also gives you guidelines about the artwork you should provide also to integrate nicely with the product browser in Komplete Kontrol in Maschine. I quickly skip to that document. So here, for instance, you see the different versions of artwork you have to provide to your product, that it appears nicely in the product browser. So this is, for instance, one of our products, Mavericks. And here you see that you have to provide different versions, for instance, here for the on-screen overlay or for the Maschine Studio browser, and so on. And what else do we have? Part of this document are also guidelines. These guidelines are important actually to provide this cohesive user experience on the hardware. And because NKS is mostly about integrating your product nicely with the hardware, to make use of the light guides, for instance, here you have a document which describes how you should use the light guides. There are a lot of colors predefined which are available for the light guides, and it's also predefined how you should use them. So for instance, that you should use red colors for drum notes and so on. What else do we have? When you create your presets for your products, it's really important that these presets are properly tagged actually, and therefore you have a predefined set of tags. For instance, here you have the base, the analog base, and what else do we have? And exactly. Going back to the presentation. So we have this set of guidelines. There's also part of the SDK is the technical specification. The technical specification defines our vendor-specific calls, how we open up actually the VST plugin format. So there are specific vendor-specific calls for accessing the light guides, for saving and loading plugin presets, and for changing the view modes. Especially our products are providing different view modes, so larger and smaller view modes. So it's possible actually to see smaller representations of the plugin UIs in the mixer strip of Maschine, for instance. So that you don't end up with this huge UIs as you have seen with some of our plugins. So what else do we have? We also have a definition of, or part of NKS is the definition of a new file format. Here the goal was actually to have a really simple file format which allows every third-party vendor to provide the necessary information to our host applications. And this file format is a really easy riff chunk based file format. Maybe I can show you also this document briefly. In the desktop. Oh yeah, I have it. So this is the technical. This is the technical documentation. Here we have a small document about the file format, and as you see, it's a quite small format, and here all the riff chunks are defined. And these chunks are basically or mainly about the additional information which is shown in the Maschine browser. The mappings are stored within the file, and there is a place where you can store the binary chunk of your actual plugin. What else do we have? Also part of the SDK is a demo implementation. So we have a demo plugin So I think this is a good starting point when you want to implement NKS. You just have to look up the implementation here in these two files, and then you see how you should implement the calls, so the plugin, all these vendor-specific calls, and the back and forth communication between the plugin and the VST host. What else do we have? There is what's quite important. There is a deployment template. So when you want to make your plugin NKS ready, you need to deploy some files to the hard drive and write some information also to the registry. So this is important because how it works is when machine starts at startup, it checks for new installed products, and in the registry, machine is looking for a certain registry key where in this registry keys are basically pointing to the installation paths of the new product. And there are, like maybe I should just open one of these. There you can find informations like, okay, this content product works with this and that version of the host, and that's the vendor, and also informations like where is the artwork stored is contained in these kind of files. So in this deployment template, you also see the images, so the artwork we are providing for the visual browser. You can see here, in this example, it's maybe a little bit too small, but this is the picture for the Maschine browser. In this case, it's Monarch. And for the different versions of our product browser. So I think that's it for the technical SDK part. So then I'm just talking about the necessary steps actually to get NKS into your product. So what you need to do as a plugin developer to implement NKS is, first of all, you have to define a product which appears in the end in the product browser. Therefore, you have to create all the artworks. You have to create a short name which appears later on the hardware. You have to define the preset location for your product, so where Maschine finds all that stuff. And you have to define a product category and a product color for your product. So, for instance, the product category could be a sampled instruments or a drum machine or whatever. So, then as a second step, when you have created the product, you have to create the presets for your product, which appear later on in the product browser. There are basically two ways to do this. The first way is you can implement the NKS file format by your own. So, and with the specification, you can basically implement this into your product and save all the necessary information. The other way to do is, if you don't want to implement this file format for your own product, you can use the Maschine content production version, our sound design version. And there is a save button, and you can just adjust, or you do the parameter mapping and all the tagging in the Maschine browser, and then just hit save. And that's also an easy way without any implementation effort to create Maschine presets. The last thing you have to do is then implement all the VST extensions, so the vendor-specific calls, so you can communicate with the hardware, with the light guide. You can implement the view mode switches, so there are calls via you can switch the view modes. And the last one, the last call you need to implement is basically to store and load the presets for your plugin. So, if you have further information regarding NKS, this is the email address. And that's it from our side. Thank you very much.